and get started. Hi, I'm Renee Hobbs, and welcome to EDC 534, Digital Authorship. That's the graduate course at the University of Rhode Island's Harrington School of Communication and Media. It's part of the graduate certificate in digital literacy, and I see here with me tonight Pam, Lauren, Lynn, and Kathleen, 4 of my 10 favorite people who are in this class. So those of you who are not who are watching this recording, we're sorry you're not here, but we're glad that the 4 of you guys have showed up. Okay, so tonight's topic is in a way a place of transition to a tier 2, to talking about leadership in digital literacy. But it's also a way to kind of reflect back on some of the gaps and the paradoxes of digital literacy that are evident when you really dive in deep to this practice. Just the same way when we read Patricia Lang on issues of image representation and the paradox of parents and kids making YouTube videos and the wacko messes that can happen around the ethics of representation. Tonight's class on collaboration and context also brings up some interesting tensions. And so I want to, before we go any further, I just want to talk a little bit about those tensions, because some of the work that was in the readings last week for that are due on Friday, the work that you're reading now, is really invitational. It's almost like a new branch of scholarship in digital literacy kind of breaking off. And in a way, your work is speaking to that in some really interesting ways. One of the things that I was really pleased to see, and I'm looking forward to reading all of these, but some of you have already started to write your organizational narratives, your 10-minute free write about the organizations that you're part of. And so if you go to that website, that Google Doc page now, you'll see the Seacoast Mothers, the SAD and the MAD organization, the Public Library, and the Grace Note Singers. Oh, Pam, wow. Cool. And I'm going to add my own writing about an organization that I'm a part of. And in some ways, this phenomenon is that our own identities as educators and as creative people is shaped or constrained by the organizational context in which we work. In one of the readings, the reading by Erica Halverson and her colleagues, they compare and contrast 2 youth media organizations, one in New York City and one in Minneapolis or Minnesota somewhere. And they point out how both programs are giving youth a voice and doing youth media, and kids are making videos. But in one program, the focus is on the kid's identity as a member of a community. And in the other program, the focus is on the kid's identity as an individual creative artist. And the authors point out that those are 2 different ways of thinking about identity that have real implications for what kids make, and then how faculty, how teachers support that learning. Really intriguing. In the other reading by Alicia Blum Ross, she did unbelievable amount of field work. She spent 100 hours observing 11 youth media organizations in central London. And she also struggled with some paradoxes about identity. What she found was that youth media programs, youth voice media programs that happen outside of school are largely targeted disenfranchised youth, right? Kids who have been marginalized in some ways from traditional educational contexts. But she found that these kids were intent on replicating the very stereotypes that position them as gang members, right? So these kids were, in their own ways of representing their identity, they were self-stereotyping by making movies featuring murders and gangs and fake blood and all the rest. And she found that only one of the 65 teachers that she interviewed banned the topic of gangs, refusing to let kids self-stereotype themselves. And so she blamed, and I don't know if this is right or not, but it's kind of what this topic tonight wants us to reflect on. She kind of blamed the rhetoric of empowerment as butting up against the financial realities of the organization, which had to position the kids as marginalized and at risk, and couldn't possibly ask those kids to critically analyze media because they wouldn't show up, because that is not fun. But giving the kids cameras and letting them make movies, that's fun. And so these paradoxes about identity, about representation, about stereotypes, about the political economy of the organizations we work for, and about our own understandings of what identity means, what voice and empowerment mean, they proliferate, those questions proliferate in all of us who are doing this work. One of the reasons why this topic is particularly relevant to me is I just received my LEAP 2s from my undergraduates, right? And they are enrolled in my propaganda class. And I am telling you, young adults, there's only 2 topics they really care about, right? Their bodies, right? And their sex, their gender, right? And their relationships. That's it. And oh boy, did this time I want to go, if I have to read one more goddamn body image paper, I'm going to kill myself. So I'm confronting these very challenges that are embedded in the readings this week. And it's a hot mess for thinking about identity and empowerment. And it's interesting to problematize those concepts. All right, that's my 5-minute rant on the topic. Did anyone want to comment on my comment while I set myself up for what's next? Did that make sense at all? Or was that just crazy? Yes.
I sent you this thing, Renee, up today. I think on Twitter it was an article about how, I think it was in BuzzFeed News, about how everyone's freaking out about the younger generation not being able to read into disinformation, but it's actually those that are 50, 60 years old, they're the ones that are actually the more apt to be prone to fall for this stuff. So I thought I haven't read it. It looked really, it's one of those things that I bookmarked away. So that's for future reading for sure.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Brian, because in some ways, those of us who are on that older side of things, we grew up in an era where there was an Encyclopedia Britannica, and it had true facts. Right?
Yeah, I see it with my dad sometimes. He'll repost things on Facebook uncritically, and it'll be of that, what was the fake Denver newspaper, the Denver Guardian or something like that. That was like during the election. He would post something like, Dad, that's not real stuff. And so he's very quick to say, if it's not coming from the Times, the Tribune, or something else, just check your wallet. And he still does it. So
thanks for sharing. Yeah. Who's getting a message that Zoom can't detect my audio? Okay, so you're going to try to log back out and log back in. Yeah, that sometimes happens with this technology. All right, so this issue of collaboration in context, I thought it would be interesting first of all, I just want to say how much fun have I been having with your reading your Leap, viewing your Leap 2 productions, and you should have gotten your feedback from me sometime earlier today. And these were the themes. Okay, now, Pam, can we hear you now? Are you there?
I don't know. Can you?
Oh, yes. There you go. It's working. Wonderful. Second time's a charm. So as I was looking at some of you who were creating the spark about the reading, I was really intrigued by these themes that came out, right? So some of you read the beautiful Jillian Belanger book review, really great example of how sometimes it's better to read a book review than it is to read the book. Right? A really important insight there about empowering language learners, or this idea of learners developing autonomy. And then some of you wrote about this, how to work within the current realities of our educational frameworks. And that is a really interesting problem that gets introduced this week in the readings around the way in which our choices about how to move forward with digital literacy are shaped by the institutional realities of what's possible where we are. Some of you wrote about the readings in relation to this idea about what it means for a student work to be authentic, right? And problematizing that concept and reflecting on that context in relation to the student's own identity. Then many of you referred to who read the Belanger article, talked about how she points out something the author of the book doesn't seem to notice, that the teacher's personality and his interpersonal dynamics are seeming to have the big impact on learning. In that article, Belanger said this guy was extroverted and connected, and that factor, his performance, his theatrical performance as an instructor, was in creating this learning environment where students felt free to take risks and so forth. And then another really interesting insight from the Belanger article, the idea that students' attitudes are positively shaped when bilingual experts from the community are treated as sources of legitimate knowledge. And that goes back to the point I was making in the beginning about identity having this dialectic between a focus on your community identity as you are a member of a group, or your individualized identity, you are a creative person. So I was really pleased to see how you were playing with the spark process. And I'd love to hear from some of you about your perceptions of what do you think are the strengths and limitations of, we called it sparking a reading. Like, in terms of that tool, what do you think are its strengths and its limitations as you got to experiment with it?
I think in the previous one that I played with, I haven't done the one for this week. It's really, it takes the design concerns out of it. Everything looks pretty slick. Even though it might all look the same, it still looks nice. Years ago, I went through and actually taught myself the most basic HTML, and it's a drag, when you have to go back and forth, like where's the comma or the ellipse or whatever it was that you have to go back and find it. So like that part's always, nice to kind of, from a formatting issue with it. But then, like, because we're talking about copyright so much, it's like, ooh, I could really just use the stock images, or should I go ahead and try using something else? So I think I was probably more gun shy to maybe try pulling a meme offline to kind of use it in it as well, versus just what it was already offered from their stock photos as well.
Right, but it does make everything look good. It does, and they give you those the stock photos that are available there's a lot of choices there. Thanks for sharing. Other perspectives on what do you think about the affordances and the limitations of that sparking a kind of commentary on the reading?
What I liked about it for myself, just kind of looking back at it afterward, I felt like I had made my choices for the quotes, and then I was finding the images that I felt were reflective of those quotes. And then just going back and trying to take an objective look, I thought, okay, I kind of, as an outsider, could understand my thought process, my synthesis of the material. And I think it can just be a unique way to have students synthesize information and share their knowledge. Whereas, in class, we might quickly have them, okay, bullet out, what are the biggest points? But this takes a different spin because you're adding the images too. So I think it makes you just reflect a little bit more. So I think it's a nice creative synthesis of material and a demonstration of knowledge.
Interesting point about how the images actually create another kind of synthesis opportunity. With my undergraduate students, I have certainly seen examples where I can see a lack of comprehension by the poor choice of image, right? It's like, So, right? Not every image is an equally good choice of image. And sometimes you can see the challenges, the comprehension challenges that the learner is facing, right? Other thoughts on the Spark? Anybody else want to weigh in on it?
Yeah, I found that, I went back and read your directions after I kind of had created a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that you said, to reflect on what the quotes, the pull quotes that I had done. But I used the quote feature.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to try and go back in, I couldn't figure out how I could keep that quote feature for the quote and then add my synthesis.
Yeah.
And so I ended up just putting like one little overall reflection at the end. Mm-hmm. So that was a disadvantage to me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Pam. It's interesting how the template is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Right? It's a blessing and a curse. And that makes it a good on-ramp for creativity, but it also gives it a bit of a ceiling, right? It limits us in a little bit of a way. So I'm actually kind of glad that you experienced that. Okay, so I have this crazy idea. I don't know if this is going to work. And hold on just a second. For this to work, I think I have to, yes, okay, here we go. I want to show you this video. It's a video that comes from lynda.com. Lynda.com is this really interesting platform that provides you with short videos to learn a lot of different digital media tools and technologies. Many universities have subscriptions to lynda.com. It's little tutorials on all kinds of topics. And I found this one and I thought, whoa, I don't know why, but I love it and I hate it. And it made me think a lot about some of the topics in the reading. So here's what I thought we would do. We're going to watch this short video. And then, if possible, I'd like you to think about these questions. What parts of this video make sense to you and align with your lived experience? Number 2, what type are you? And number 3, how useful is this advice? Okay, so that's kind of what we're gonna look at. It's a very short video. We'll watch it together. I'm gonna see if I can make the screen big. And then we'll kind of come back together and maybe we'll work in a small group to talk it over with. Give me a thumbs up if you can see the whole screen.
In everyday conversation, you often hear people use the terms creativity and innovation as if they're the same. In reality, they're different but complementary concepts. Creativity is the production of novel and useful ideas by an individual or team. Innovation is the process of trying to get value out of these ideas. One is about the engine of coming up with possibilities, and the other is about vetting, improving, and testing things in order to make possibilities become realities. The creative types tend to be more into ideas, upsetting the status quo, trying new things, and taking risks. People who fit more innovative roles tend to be more into refining ideas, understanding risks and constraints, and learning about how far we can push without causing problems internally or with our customers. To be clear, I'm not talking about places in the organization such as new product development versus accounting. I'm talking about every area of the company being comprised of both types. Sure, in some areas the proportions might vary, but both types work in every area. Here's why the distinction is so important. Most professionals tend to be more of one type than the other. They're either creative, they have ideas, they see possibilities, or innovative. They're wired to think about risks, experimenting with and building upon the ideas of others, and so on. Both groups are vital, but they don't always understand their colleagues in the other group. So if you're a creative type, remember these tips. Learn when to share your comments and ideas. For example, sometimes offline with one targeted person instead of unexpectedly in a meeting where you're likely to surprise many people. Also, learn how to share your ideas. Instead of simply and passionately blurting them out, think first about how others might react and why. For example, see if it's possible to frame your idea in terms of already established group goals or company level goals. And ideally, find one or two supporters for your idea before sharing it widely. Finally, don't forget to show a little genuine appreciation for the innovators who ultimately have to vet and improve your ideas so they finally add real value. Now, if you're the innovative type, here are two vital tips. First, learn how to help creatives without being negative or too quickly critical. Your creative counterparts often have thin skin, and you want to support their continued creative engagement. That means you have to strive to have your initial reaction to any new idea be positive, not negative. Second, just as I mentioned above, it really does help if you find a sincere way once in a while to show your interest and appreciation for whatever their latest idea might be. So remember, creativity and innovation are not the same. They are two different types of people and activities that have to learn how to dance together. You can make that happen by first figuring out which one you are, and then by learning how to show a little understanding and appreciation for the contributions of the other group.
Okay, so we're going to break up into groups. Here are their three questions again, just to remind you. What do you like and dislike about this video? What type are you? And what is your opinion about the advice? All right, so here we go. We're going to be two breakout groups. We're just going to talk for like 5 minutes, all right? So here we go. Give me a thumbs up if you know what we're doing. All right, let's have fun. Ooh. Okay, I think I did that right.
Can you guys hear? Oh, that's Renee.
Cool. All right. So what did you like about the, or not like about the video? I think I always like see the like whenever they offer a binary of like saying you're either an introvert or an extrovert, and whether or not there's the spectrum of any given situation. I know it's easy to use that binary as just kind of an initial kind of jumping off point for the discussion. So I get that part, but you know, I think the spectrum is wide for sure.
It's a really good point, though. It is kind of fun.
Yeah.
To have that either or choice.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
I like that, the binaries for that purpose, the playfulness or the fun of it.
Oh, I mean, it's perfect for starting conversations for sure.
Well, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm coming off a really long day. I flew down. I'm in Florida with my mom and my 3-year-old son. So we had a really long flight and up at, 4:00 in the morning. I found the video I found his tone a little condescending, and like almost like the creatives are like the children that need to like, you need to learn when to say your ideas, and that like the innovator, because the innovators are going to have to take care of that, So I was like, well, I think I'm a creative type, but I don't think I'm like I gotta censor myself and learn when to share your ideas, learn how to share your ideas, and show appreciation to the innovators. Like what does that mean? Am I kowtowing to them? Like, I really appreciate what you're going to do to my idea because it's not ready yet. So, like, I just felt like, I don't know. Maybe that's my 3 hours of sleep. I don't know. But 3 hours trapped on a plane with a 3-year-old. Yeah, I felt like
I thought that was I do feel like your point about it being patronizing. I do think that is interesting, that the creatives seem to have been treated like more like children. That's a very interesting observation.
Like, we don't know when to speak, and we don't know how to speak, and it was
right.
It's funny, and when we're thin-skinned. So,
right. Kathleen, what was your perception of that video? What'd you like about it? What'd you dislike about it?
Well, I like the polarity. I mean, I think it's always interesting to see the far ends of each other. But I agree with Lynn. It's very obvious that he was an innovator. And that he had to put up with all of us creatives all the time. It reminds me of when I used to do the Myers-Briggs interpretation, and you describe the difference between thinkers and feelers. And somebody said, oh, well, all you feelers are fluffy, it's just very dismissive. And I got that same feeling when he was talking about the creative people.
I mean, even the graphics he was using for the 2 tips for the innovators is then show appreciation. There's like the people in the background showing like they're clapping. Good job, creative types. Thank you. Like I just thought that was very funny.
I wrote down, understand the poor things. They can't help being creative.
They can't help it. They're thin-skinned. Be gentle with them.
So what is the point of making a distinction like this then? Like, is this an important distinction? I mean, based on your experience in working in organizations and workplaces?
I teach in an interdisciplinary class where it's me and a social studies teacher, and we teach for 2 blocks of a day. And, despite the binary of it, there's a lot of truth to what he was saying and the dynamic that we have. I mean, oftentimes I'm like, well, what if we do this? And and my partner will say, okay, well, then this is how we'll sequence that out. So, there is, for it to work well, there is you have to get each other in that way. So, I mean, I've when he's describing, like, oh, that's me and Dave for sure, so like that, there is a, and it might be different with a different person in a different scenario, but that, like what the way he was describing, that felt like a lot of like what happens with us. So there's some truth in the dynamic that he's.
I totally agree with you, Brian. I think that there is truth to it. That's why he made it. It's a reality. And I think one of the best things about whether you're co-teaching or, whatever you're doing is hopefully being paired up with someone that's your opposite. So that when you find the way to work together, it's like a great whole, WHOLE.
It reminded me of a dynamic I have with a friend of mine. We're both creatives, and I can throw something out to her like, what's the problem with plastics in the ocean? And she and I can sit and we can talk about, if we were in charge of the world, what this idea and that idea. What I've seen in her over over her own personal evolution is she runs her own homeopathic cold remedy company. It's Cold Be Gone. It is going to be in CVS. But that for her to get there, she really had to go and seek out angel investors and talk with them about, like, she had the creativity, she had the product. So I can totally see how those innovators, those entrepreneurs, those people that she was talking to a young woman starting her own business, of a product that is natural, beneficial, and like getting it out, helping her get it out there. She definitely would not have come as far as she has. So I definitely see that for sure.
Right. That's a great example of, he defined, I was kind of quibbling with the word innovate. I'm definitely feel like my whole life has been characterized by me being the stupid creative, blurting out the creative idea in front of a faculty meeting of 150 people, right? And everybody going,
you clearly didn't watch this video. You just need to time it right.
I think I'm probably still learning that. I don't know that I ever learn how to share and when to share. I never thought about that. That's like earth-shattering news to me. And I'm not sure how good I would be at doing it. But I also wondered, like, is innovator the right word for these people? Because when you described the angel investor.
Right. They didn't come up with the idea.
But they did see the value of it. And they did move through the steps in the process to get her to be able to launch that thing.
Yes.
So that is a hugely important function.
I feel the same way. I didn't know if innovator was the right term. It's like the creatives are like the artistic, imaginative types. And then whoever this other group is, they're like the practical, let's figure out how to make this feasible types. Like, I don't know what you call that, if that's innovation or facilitation. I don't know.
Or implementation.
Implementation, facilitation. Yes.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder, innovation is definitely a very flattering word. Same way creative is, right? So everybody would want to be either one or both. Whereas implementer,
no
way, Lynn. No way, Kathleen. I'm not. I don't want to.
That doesn't sound as glamorous. It really doesn't. Yeah.
It's not as glamorous.
No.
But is there creativity in that job or no? Is innovation the right word for that function? Your partner, Brian, social studies guy, who keeps your ideas, gives your ideas a structure. Is there creativity to that?
Sorry, on his end or on my end?
On his end.
Yeah, it's not like I'm bossing it around or anything like that. It's the I just think that there's more. I think there's just a more tendency to be pragmatic. I'm the dreamer, and there's the person that actually puts it in order and all of that. So it's not that they're not innovative, because I think my buddy Dave, he was part of the initial pilot for the program. It was interdisciplinary, but prior to me getting there many years ago, it was called like the C4 program, where it was truly interdisciplinary. It was math, science, English, and social studies, and all the teachers kind of worked together to create a curriculum from it. So that took a lot of risk and creativity. Right. So it was born out of that. So that was cool. And so I wasn't there for that. I was part of the.
So maybe over time, his role has shifted from being creative to the innovator role to sustain this thing.
For sure.
Huh. Interesting.
I guess, like, I just looked up the definition for innovation. So I guess that depends on what side of innovation you're thinking about. Because part of innovation means a new method, idea, or product. But to me, that's the creative types coming up with the new thing. But it also says, let me see, what was the good definition here? The process of translating an idea or invention into a good or service that will create value So that I see. So again, I don't know what word I'd use. Maybe they've got different, like maybe the restyler. I don't know, the renovator. The
Right.
transformer.
What was the directionality thing that we did at the institute?
North, east, southwest.
Yeah, like this is like, to me, like that feels like it's more of what we're talking about now is like step one. Step two is the directional part, where now you really get to kind of go after those personality types.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought about it in relation to the northeast, southwest, but Julie and I, north and west, right? Definitely, there's something that goes to it. Okay, so the breakout sessions are going to close in a minute. You're going to have to try to summarize some idea from this conversation to share with the rest of the group. So good luck with that. Okay. We are coming back in this crazy session called Collaboration in Context. That's the theme for the week. Collaboration in context. And so we've just been talking about two identity positions, creators and innovators. And we'll kind of go around the room, and if you can just try to synthesize something interesting that came out of your conversation that you'd like to share.
I think
Sorry.
Thanks, Scott.
Oh, I'm gonna go. All right. So we couldn't really decide whether we were the innovator or the creator. We kind of felt sometimes we were creator, sometimes we were innovator, and we kind of had a tough time figuring out which role we fit in. And we weren't sure if it was aimed towards educators or tech industry. So that's what we kind of discussed for that.
How blurry those categories really are.
Right.
Fair enough. Thanks for sharing.
We talked about the interesting, the polarity between the two, that you're either this or you're this. And we talked about how I felt that it seemed kind of condescending towards the creative types about, informing them of when they should speak and how they should speak, and, and then show appreciation to the innovators. So it was very much like, I felt like creative types were like the little kids almost, like, and then the innovators were like, oh, we'll take care of it, so that's one of the things that we touched on.
I think another thing that we touched on was that in every team or group, you really need people to function at both ends of that spectrum. But I think how he described it made you either like what he said or not like what he said, when in reality you do need people that have those skills and those traits.
Yes.
I also think, though, too, that a given individual can have both of those. We can be both the creator and the innovator, depending on the scenario. I had shared that I feel at times I play more the creator role, where I have this great idea and, I don't know how to execute any of the details. And then on the flip side, I've also looked at something more critically and said, well, here's how we can, make this work or not make this work. So I think we all have that capacity to be both.
Definitely.
I felt as though this video would have been a really good video for an all young male startup tech company. But I found my gender radar going off a little bit when he started talking about, the creatives need to hold back and not put every idea out there, because I feel like women already do that, We already have to have the idea fully formed in our brain before we'll put it out in a group. And I don't think we need anybody telling us that we need to hold back and not put our ideas out there. That was touchy for me. And I'm not thin-skinned when somebody wants to.
Thank you for sharing. That was such a great point. Anybody else want to reflect on the creator innovator dialectic and how it relates to this idea of bringing digital literacy forward in the context where you work? How is this dialectic relevant to you as a digital literacy leader, bringing forward digital literacy pedagogies in the place where you work?
Well, I'm not currently working anywhere outside the home right now, but I could see from my experience working in school districts how, or even in a public library situation, you may have these great ideas to spark creativity in patrons and students, but then how to get there, whether you're restricted by budgetary confinements, by technological confinements, by privacy confinement, whatever it is that is boxing you in, and how to get over those hurdles and make the digital literacy and digital instruction feasible and meaningful.
I'm also thinking of just on this as a kind of like a facilitator for PD when I do PD in my building sometimes, or at the district level. I think this will be helpful for me to kind of keep in mind, because I know that in any audience, I'm going to have my creators who are super excited and enthusiastic about whatever I'm sharing and thinking of the ways, here's how I can apply this. But I'm also definitely going to have my innovators who are really critiquing and thinking of all the ways that what I'm maybe putting out there, all the ways those wouldn't work, you know? So I think that's helpful to me going into a situation like that.
Great point. Thinking about the people in your building and how they might hear your ideas differently. Other thoughts?
I had an experience coming back from the Institute. I was raving about Flipgrid with one of our marketing faculty, and I thought she would be so excited about it. And instead, she got very bureaucratic about it and said, well, is that one of the things that's been approved by the IT department? And I thought, okay, I guess I should have stepped back and thought about who I was speaking to before I just shared my enthusiasm with her.
I can so relate to that, Kathleen, because as I was saying in the small group, I feel like my whole life I have been totally insensitive to those two pieces of advice. Learn when to share and how to share. Pam, I never learned those messages at all.
And we're all better off for it, Renee.
All right. Well, anyway, so the reason why I wanted to kind of come to this place now at really the end of the sort of content, this long slog of 10 weeks of like content and learning about ideas, is that in some way the theme of this week's focus, collaboration in context, is just another way of underlining this issue of how deeply contextual this work is and how we're always situated in contexts, right, where we have limited influence and limited power and limited ability to get stuff done, and how we have to adapt our ideas and our strategies in relation to that particular context. Part of the reason why it was so delightful to read your little 10-minute free writes on your context is it shows how many of the organizations that you chose to write about are places where you've been really effective in that organizational context and really have a deep awareness of what the paradoxes and tensions are about moving those organizations forward. And I feel like we don't have very much scholarship on that. That's partly why the readings for this week on how identity gets conceptualized differently in different organizational contexts was so intriguing to me. And I started thinking about my own identity in terms of how it's been influenced by the different contexts in which I work. In some ways, the leadership experience that I hope many of you are going to have this summer with Tier 2 kind of tackles some of those issues like head on, inviting you to think about your identity as a leader in relation to the context where you find yourself. Okay, so that being said, thank you for indulging me on that crazy conversation. If you find a video that better articulates this idea of collaboration in context, I would welcome, because I agree this video is annoying as hell. But as of yet, I haven't found a better one that's under 4 minutes. So maybe next year. Okay, so now here's the cool thing about what's happening, right? We guess maybe the best way to do that is to go to the path right, because you guys are really well trained now. I'm like, okay, so talk about what's happening. Oh, let's talk about what's happening next week, right? But you're going to see something marvelous, right? Or maybe sad if you're like me. It's kind of sad. But now the Create to Learn journey officially begins as you move toward your final project. So our focus question is, how can Create to Learn pedagogies be applied to the context of your work and your life? You have no reading to do. You have no videos to watch. You have no discussions to participate in, no tweets to tweet, no flip grids to flip, right? You simply have the looming deadline of your final paper project, right? But keep in mind some of these intermediate deliverables. April 12th, I need a creative brief emailed to me. By April 19th, I have had a conversation with you. Some of you have already fulfilled this one. If not, schedule time to talk by phone by clicking on that link. April 26th, it's a scope of work document. And you find that scope of work document, truthfully, if I were you, I'd be starting on the scope of work document right away, right? Because it turns out that it's a elegant, simple way to decide how small your project can be. Smaller is usually better because it enables you to do something well under a deadline. And the scope of work project allows you to take the big idea and narrow it down. Then May 3rd, you're going to have schedule some time to talk to somebody in this class. That could be through text or through Google Doc or face-to-face over a cup of coffee. You're going to talk with a peer about your project. And then May 10th, your final project and Ignite video is due. As you're starting to brainstorm, you might want to look at some of the amazing projects that students from previous years have created simply to steal good ideas if you find any, right? So they're all over the place there. But we'll continue to meet once a week in our, what did you call it, Pam? In our homey weekly gathering.
From the comfort of our own home.
From the comfort of our own homes, we'll continue to meet to chit-chat and to share things that are crossing our radar screen and to, just be in fellowship during this creative process. Because, as you know, the creative process is a roller coaster. In the next 30 days, you're going to have, hey, who's that, Jessica? Who's that cute little boy? What's his
That's
name?
my son, James.
Hey, James.
Hi.
You are the cutest ever. Look at you. In grad school already. You know, that's a good sign, Jessica. So we'll meet every Wednesday for kind of casual conversation, and that'll be an opportunity really to share what you're working on or just talk informally. But the creative process is a bit of a roller coaster, and you have 2 projects. You have whatever that project is going to be, and then you have the Ignite video, right? So we'll get a chance to talk about that all along the way in the next month of the class. Do you guys have any questions, comments, issues? Your creative project's going to be fun, and based on what I'm seeing from your Leap 1 and your Leap 2, I cannot wait to see your digital stories. Remember, those are due this Friday, right? Okay, that's good. I'll be posting those as they come up on the, let's see if I can show that to you. I'll be posting those on the digital authorship page so that you can take a look at them, right? So that'll be Leap 3 completed work. There's a couple that are up there. I haven't put I think there are 2 that are up, but I haven't put them all up. But as I get them this Friday, I'll put them all up here so you can enjoy the digital stories. So, all right, so I'll let you go now. Have a great night, and I hope to see you next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. All right, see you later. Bye-bye.